Hey nerds! Welcome to another episode of Little Lore, a project by Where the Streetlights End, where I come to you with little videos about whatever monster I think is cool this week. That monster can either be from film, from folklore, or from history in the form of a terrible human, for example. It doesn't really matter as long as I think it's neat. Subscribe to the channel for weekly videos about horror, monsters, history, and all things spooky, done with the grace of a master historian, which is me. I have a master's degree in history. Today, I'm gonna tell you a truly upsetting tale about a haunted bridge, racial violence, and a demon with the head of a goat. There is a place, well known to paranormal investigators. I have seen many a little special on this place, and I'm going to tell you all about it. The Old Alton Bridge in Denton County, Texas. It is an iron bridge that connects Denton to Copper Canyon. Those are two towns in Texas. The town of Denton and the town of Copper Canyon are connected by the Old Alton Bridge. It was built in 1884, and it was originally used by horses because in the 1880s, horses were a primary mode of transportation, as you may have guessed, and it was used largely to move animals across Hickory Creek, which ran underneath. Then, it continued to be used by vehicles until 2001, which is when they built a more up-to-date bridge nearby that would better serve automobile traffic. The Old Alton Bridge is only one lane, so in order to cross safely, travelers had to honk their horns to signal their approach. Otherwise, two vehicles coming from opposite directions would end up kind of stuck on there. It's a little bit dangerous. You gotta honk, right? In order for it to be safe. The bridge is still well suited to horse traffic and hikers who use it to connect popular trails. The bridge was added to the National Register of Historic Places on July 8, 1988. The reason that this bridge is so well known, aside from it being a historical site, has to do more with a terrible story behind it. There are multiple terrible stories, but I'm going to tell you mostly one. And the countless, terrifying, supernatural experiences that people have continued to have at that bridge over the last century. The most popular story behind the Old Alton Bridge is that of a black goat farmer named Oscar Washburn, said to have lived with his family in the area at around 1920s to 1938. He became known as the Goatman because he was an exceptionally good goat farmer. He was trustworthy and friendly, and people liked to work with him to get their goat meat, hides, milk, and all that good goat stuff, you know? It is said that in an attempt to draw more people to his business, Washburn placed a sign on the Old Alton Bridge that acted as a sort of billboard. It said, "This way to the Goatman." It was the 1930s. And so there was a very large portion of the local population who did not take too kindly to a black man not only being successful in his business ventures, but in being proud of that and advertising himself. This sign and his continued success were perceived as an act of extreme misbehavior by members of the local chapter of the Ku Klux Klan, as you can imagine. Shortly after the sign was hung in August of 1938, those racist bastards decided that they were going to teach Washburn a lesson. They went to the Goatman's house and attacked him, ultimately tying him up and dragging him off of his property down the road to the Old Alton Bridge. The story goes that they tied one end of a rope to the railing of the bridge, and they fashioned the other end into a noose. They looped the business end around Washburn's neck and threw him over the side. The shitheads were so proud of themselves that they were too busy cheering and patting each other on the ass in celebration to notice that there was something off about the tension on the rope, which disappeared below. After they were done with their little Nazi circle jerk, they looked over the rail to admire their handiwork. However, much to their surprise, and to their terror really, the noose below was dangling empty. The Goatman was nowhere to be seen. In a panic, they rushed down the banks to the creek, and they searched where he had fallen, and they found no sign that he had ever reached the ground. They found no footsteps or trails away from the water where he may have fled. It appeared that he had simply vanished. The dickheads assumed that if he had survived the fall and escaped, he would likely have returned home to get his family and either run away to avoid recapture or lock himself in the house. You know, what would you do? They went to his home and found that he wasn't there either. They did, however, find his wife and children hiding. Without getting into details, Oscar Washburn's family was killed that night, and he himself was never seen again. The clan members set the little house and goat farm ablaze, and they burned it to a pile of ash. As has often been the case throughout much of U.S. history, those individuals who terrorized and attacked Washburn and his family went unpunished for their actions. They continued to live their lives being human trash unrestricted. However, they were indeed haunted, not by guilt or regret for what they had done, but by the fear that the Goatman was still alive somewhere, waiting for his chance to exact revenge. He hadn't been hung in the noose, and his body was nowhere to be found underneath the bridge. Is it possible that he was out there in the woods, planning his vengeance against them? I'd say it's likely. Like I said, the Goatman was never seen again, alive or dead. But something else has been lurking around the Old Alton Bridge. Since the disappearance of the Goatman, Oscar Washburn, people have claimed to see a terrifying creature stalking around the old trestles, and in the forest around it. It is said that a monstrous half-man, half-goat creature with horns upon his head, hooves for feet, and the tall, muscular body of a human man can be seen guarding the bridge at night. The Old Alton Bridge has since been called the Goatman Bridge. It is believed that perhaps Washburn escaped the rope and hid in the forest, but was too injured to make his way out of the woods. Perhaps he broke a few bones or hit his head rather hard when he fell to the creek bed below. If this is the case, then he died somewhere in those woods near the bridge, either from his injuries or from the elements. Whether he died in the forest or elsewhere, his body was never found. It is believed that whether he died that night, later on after hiding alone in isolation, or if he died elsewhere, his vengeful spirit is tied to the bridge where those men tried to hang him. It is said that the fury, heartbreak, and trauma inflicted upon his soul that dreadful night has transformed his spirit into a wretched, violent, horned entity which seeks to exact revenge on those who attacked him and murdered his family back in 1938. Stories from around the area claim that, back in those days, members of the KKK would often drive with their headlights off at night so as to avoid detection on their way to and from meetings and in between their shitty KKK activities. I know that it is also a pretty redneck method to drive around with your lights off through the forest to hunt like a lazy bastard. I'm familiar with that. It is quite possible that the KKK has used this method to hunt people that they don't like as well. Because of this behavior by clan members, the demonic entity who guards the Goatman Bridge will make himself known to you today if you attempt to drive across the bridge with your lights off. It is likely that he's mistaking you for a bigot, and he appears to chase you off or even destroy you. If it is true that this is why he appears to you when you come with your headlights off, I wouldn't recommend attempting to summon him in this manner. It seems like you're telling him that you're a racist, and his reason for coming at you is not pleasant. Another method of summoning the Goatman, if you should feel so inclined, is supposedly to knock 3 times on the bridge at midnight, or turn off your headlights and honk your vehicle horn 3 times. Those who claim to have encountered the spirit of the Goatman say that before you see him, you will smell him. That's kind of the case with a lot of weird entities, isn't it? The first thing out of the ordinary to happen to you, after you summon him, is a change in the air. The refreshing night breeze filled with the scent of flowing water beneath you will be replaced with the stench of rotten flesh, like a decaying carcass. The thick musk of death will descend upon you and linger in your nostrils like a fog. Many reports state that glowing red eyes can be seen peering at you from the darkness, always just out of reach of whatever lamp or flashlight you may have on hand. Those who claim to have seen the Goatman in person, not just his eyes, say that he stomps through the forest around the bridge with the head and feet of a goat. People have said that they've seen him pounding his feet as he slowly wanders around the area carrying the severed heads of goats in his hands. And on more than one occasion, the heads were not those of goats. They were human heads. He snarls and snorts like an angry goat would do as he makes his way around the bridge. You know what I mean. It is unclear if the stench of decay comes from the rotting corpses of his victims, from his own ancient and diseased body, or if it is simply the smell of his rancid breath. There have been so many reports and encounters with this entity, and so many terrifying experiences at the Goatman Bridge since the 1930s, that it is difficult to refute that something strange is going on there. While the story of the black goat farmer named Oscar Washburn is the most widely known explanation for the supernatural forces at work around the bridge, it is not the only frightening story told about the place. Some people believe that the malicious entity seen at the bridge is not Oscar Washburn himself, but the spirit of his wife. Because Oscar was never confirmed dead or even seen again, some argue that it's unlikely that his ghost would haunt that place. However, because his wife was murdered in their home nearby, and she knew that her attackers came across that bridge to kill her and her children, her spirit may be the one guarding that path across the water. Her soul could be the one tormented by anger and pain, transformed into that wretched form of half-human, half-goat, as she seeks vengeance on those who took her life from her. Some postulate that she may be wandering the area searching for her children who were murdered with her on that night long ago. There are many variations of the story of the Goatman, and many different explanations as to the haunting of the bridge itself. Aside from a few regarding satanic rituals in the forest surrounding the bridge, the stories all reflect the cultural climate in that part of Texas, from around the time the bridge was built and when it was heavily used. That period of time between the 1880s and the 1950s was not well known for its kindness to individuals who were not light-skinned. The stories are always about racial violence, even if that aspect only appears as a smaller element of the tale. There is truly much to be discussed regarding racial violence in folktales and urban legends, and that deserves its own deep dive from me someday, or maybe from someone even more qualified. But for now, suffice to say, the longevity and the power of this legend of the Goatman and his bridge serves as a strong example of how our local histories and cultures power the stories that we tell. The stories that stick around and continue to be told and capture the imaginations of future generations are the ones that we see some deep importance in. In the case of the Goatman's tragic tale, I think we can see that there are two major cultural concepts that lurk beneath the surface of our consciousness. The first is the more positive one, in my opinion, and that is a lasting guilt for the racial violence that has been so prevalent throughout our history, and perhaps the need to warn against continuing to behave in such inhuman, honestly evil ways toward each other just because of things like skin color. The other theme, whether conscious or unconscious within our culture, is that of the magical person who isn't white. You know what I mean? So there is superstition, particularly among small rural white communities, that people of other races, whether they be indigenous, black, or whatever else have you, have some weird magical power. This is honestly a negative stereotype, but it is constant in urban legends and horror stories. The idea that a black man who was murdered would then go on to become some powerful demonic force is in line with stories of voodoo men and the shaman Navajo who put spells on people. You know what I'm talking about. In the comments below, if you want to, you are welcome to tell me about a popular horror story or urban legend involving an ethically diverse cast, where someone non-white has some magical aptitude of some sort, and it's a key plot component. Because thinking about it now, I'm having a hard time coming up with examples that don't have a character like that, as long as we're in this sort of supernatural horror subgenre. Give me examples, or feel free to explain why I'm wrong about that being a trope. I like to be told I'm wrong too, it's fun. Tell me anything. Tell me what your favorite kind of cheese is. Anyway, that's the story of the Goatman Bridge in Denton County, Texas, also known as the Old Alton Bridge. And whether those stories are true, they're not stories, they're urban legends. There's probably some truth that created the story, as is usually the case. Some concept that was true at the time that evolved through the constant storytelling, the folklore-ness of the tale. But regardless of what stories are true, and whether that bridge is haunted, I'd like to go there someday. If I ever make money from doing this, I will go there, if it funds my trip. Whether the bridge is haunted, whether some tragic story did happen or not, no matter what, it's a cool old bridge, and the story is important, and the story is popular for a reason. And there it is, that is the story. Have you ever been there? Did you see a Goatman? What other Goatmen are there? There's lots of weird anthropomorphic, half-human, half-animal entities I've been talking about lately, huh? Please subscribe to my channel if you like this sort of thing. I'm here just about once a week with some horror, history, and folklore for you. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, comment if you want to join in the conversation, and go find my Patreon if you want to support me and get extra content. Links will be in the description, and I'll put them up when I fuck off. I'm fucking off now. Later, nerd.